Good Thursday, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for December the 8th. Today we are reading together in Proverbs 21. Proverbs 21 is our text for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let me go and get the text up on the screen for us so we can get to reading here within this text. Remember, we have here this one final entire section of the Proverbs dedicated to the single sentence sayings of Solomon. We're going to go through about half of chapter 22 tomorrow, and then pick up with some longer sayings of Solomon. They are start looking a little more closely. That it's not like what we saw in the previous section in chapters 1 through 10, or excuse me, 1 through 9, which focused on kind of longer details, not really stories, but longer examples. It's not really what we're looking at. We're looking at basically doubled of the single sentence sayings. They're 2 to 3, sometimes 4 sentences that have longer sayings. They're actually described within the text, beginning in chapter 22 and verse 17 and going through chapter 24 and verse 22. They're described as the 30 wise sayings of Solomon. So we're going to start looking at those tomorrow as well. We'll begin that in chapter 22 and verse 17. But for today, we do have this one final section that focuses on the single sentence sayings. So let me go and get that text up on the screen for us, and we will get to reading together today. Actually, it's already up on the screen. Just kidding. Let's see here. Double check to make sure it looks like I want it to look. All right, we're good to go. Again, thanks for tuning in today. Let's go ahead and get to reading here in Proverbs 21. A king's heart is like channeled water in the Lord's hand. He directs it wherever he chooses. All a person's ways seem right to him, but the Lord weighs hearts. Doing what is righteous and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. The lamp that guides the wicked, haughty eyes, and arrogant heart is sin. The plans of the diligent certainly lead to profit, but anyone who is reckless certainly becomes poor. Making a fortune through a lying tongue is a vanishing mist, a pursuit of death. The violence of the wicked sweeps them away because they refuse to act justly. A guilty one's conduct is crooked, but the behavior of the innocent is upright. Better to live on the corner of a roof than to share a house with a nagging wife. A wicked person desires evil. He has no consideration for his neighbor. When a mocker is punished, the inexperienced become wiser. When one teaches a wise man, he acquires knowledge. The righteous one considers the house of the wicked. He brings the wicked to ruin. The one who shuts his ears to the cry of the poor will himself also call out and not be answered. A secret gift soothes anger, and a covert bribe fierce rage. Justice executed is a joy to the righteous, but a terror to evildoers. The person who strays from the way of prudence will come to rest in the assembly of the departed spirits. The one who loves pleasure will become poor. Whoever loves wine and oil will not get rich. The wicked are a ransom for the righteous, and the treacherous for the upright. Better to live in a wilderness than with a nagging and hot-tempered wife. Precious treasure and oil are in the dwelling of the wise person, but a fool consumes them. The one who pursues righteousness and faithful love will find life, righteousness, and honor. A wise person went up against a city of warriors and brought down its secure fortress. The one who guards his mouth and tongue keeps himself out of trouble. The arrogant and proud person, named mocker, acts with excessive arrogance. A slacker's craving will kill him because his hands refuse to work. He is filled with craving all day long, but the righteous give and don't hold back. The sacrifice of a wicked person is detestable. How much more so when he brings it with ulterior motives? A lying witness will perish, but the one who listens will speak successfully. A wicked person puts on a bold face, but the upright one considers his way. No wisdom, no understanding, and no counsel will prevail against the Lord. And finally, verse 31, a horse is prepared for the day of battle, but victory comes from the Lord. And that is Proverbs 21. All right, for my top three for today, have a couple of double ups here because there's a couple of verses that go along the same lines. Begin with my number one is going to be verses 23 and 27, or excuse me, let me correct that. Verse 3 and 27. Verse 3 and verse 27. So verse 3 says, doing what is righteous and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. And then verse 27 states, the sacrifice of a wicked person is detestable. How much more so when he brings it with ulterior motives? So what we're looking at here with these two verses is the reality that God wants and desires for us to live consistently. So in verse 3, he would rather us live righteous and just lives than to simply give outward religious actions. Because the problem here is inconsistency. If somebody is not living righteously or justly, yet they want to come before their God and try to offer sacrifices, well, that's nothing but trying to save face. That's nothing but being the honest, exact definition of a hypocrite. And the same thing's true in verse 27. The sacrifice of a wicked person is detestable. How much more so when he brings it with ulterior motives? The person recognizes that the sacrifice that he's offering to God, it's not honest. He's not offering this to God because he truly loves God and cares for God and desires to honor and please God. No, he's trying to get something out of it. Again, there's inconsistency there. Their actions outwardly in this religious sense try to show one thing, but within the heart, within the motivations, within who they actually are, it's completely different. So the call here in these two verses, then, verses 3 and verse 27, I believe, are really to focus on the need to be consistent in who we are and in what we do. So that's my number one for today is verse 3 and verse 27. Be consistent. Live the way you want to live in such a way that it backs up your religious practice. Don't just show up and start offering sacrifices and doing things for religious show, but actually live in the proper manner. So that's my number one, verses 3 and verse 27. My number two for today is verse 9 and verse 19. So here I am getting myself in all sorts of trouble, but just recognizing the reality of these verses. I know it's easy for husbands to use these verses and to joke around. It's better to live on the corner of a roof than in a house with a nagging wife, or it's better to live in a wilderness than with nagging and hot-tempered wife. We joke around and say, ha, ha, har, har, har. It's funny, right? But this just shows the importance of having a good wife. That's the reality of these verses. These verses show just how much influence and how much impact a quality wife has on the life of any individual man. And again, you take these two verses and you compare them with what we see at in the last portion of Proverbs 31. And that's the type of wife that every man should desire. That's the type of wife that we've read about already and noted is a blessing from God and allows a man to be highly favored in the sight of God in having such a good wife. So yeah, joke around, I guess you want to with these verses, but really take them seriously. Take them seriously and recognize the value of a godly, good, supportive wife. Because honestly, it'd be better off to be out in the wilderness or to be kicked out of the house than to have to live with one who is described here as nagging, which there's a note there from chapter 19 and verse 13, which earlier described nagging. Chapter 19 and verse 13 says, a foolish son is a father's ruin and a wife's nagging is an endless dripping. Just giving some detail here. Nagging is bitter conflict and discord. It is strife and dissension, contention and quarreling. Yeah, it would be better to live out in the middle of nowhere and not have to interact with somebody who behaves like this. So we should. Again, I read these verses and I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful for my wife and the fact that she, in no way, shape, or form, uh, is this. This is not who she is. She's very supportive, very loving, very caring, very helpful. She's a blessing to me and to all of us who are husbands thinking about this. We should be thankful for our wives if they are in the same manner. And for those who are wives, consider the blessing that you could be to your husbands by having a good disposition and being very supportive in your household together. So that's my number 2 for today, verses 9 and 19. Again, better to live on the corner of a roof than share a house with a nagging wife, and then better to live in the wilderness than with a nagging and hot-tempered wife. That's verse 19. That's my number 2 for today. And number 3 is going to be verse number 30. Verse 30. And sorry for not scrolling down here and highlighting these. Verse 30. No wisdom, no understanding, and no counsel will prevail against the Lord. You know, how often people want to take some teaching of Scripture that is very clear and plain and obvious that says, if you do this, you will be blessed. And yet they think, nah, I'm good. I think this other thing is going to be better for me. And how often do they do that other thing and it turns out to be a disaster? My suggestion to you is every single time. Now, there is nothing that's going to be better at the end of the day than for us to listen to the wisdom and the understanding and the counsel of God. Because any wisdom, understanding, or counsel against him is not going to prevail. It's only going to lead to trouble. It's only going to cause issues, because there is no wisdom, understanding, or counsel that is greater than the wisdom, understanding, and counsel that God gives us. And that's what Proverbs is. The book of Proverbs is wisdom, it is understanding, it is counsel delivered to us by God through his grace and mercy to help us do life better and to help us make good decisions and to help us be blessed by those good decisions. So as I think about reading through this text over the past 3 weeks or so, and continuing to do it for the next 9-10 days or so, I'm just very thankful for this wisdom that God has given. There's been lots of things to consider. We could spend a whole lot much more time thinking about what is found here within this text and all the good tidbits of wisdom that are found even just within this section of chapter 10 through 22, these single sentence sayings of wisdom. I'm just very thankful for what God has given us, and I'm thankful to be able to read this together with you, and hopefully to remind ourselves of some important ideas and some important principles that can help us to be blessed in this life and to help us benefit from the blessing that God has given us of these sayings of wisdom, that if we will listen to them, if we will humble ourselves before them, if we will listen to them, if we will apply them, we will very much so be benefited. Because again, no wisdom, no understanding, no counsel will prevail against the Lord. His is the greatest, and there truly is no competition. Thank you so much for tuning into this reading today. Hope you have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll be back at it again tomorrow as we read together in chapter 22, wrap up the final of this section's short single sentence sayings, and then get into the 30 sayings of wisdom that are offered up by Solomon beginning in chapter 17, or excuse me, in verse 17 tomorrow of chapter 22. Looking forward to reading that with you then. Take care and God bless.